So we reflected on those negative turns in our lives. Earlier, a couple of weeks ago, we noted any emerging themes, and then we considered what redemptive purposes God might have in any of those negative turns. Then we determined, I think just last week was it, picking our roles, that we picked our roles, and then we were asked to consider an inciting incident that might help us to achieve our goal for that role. So lots of terminology, lots of things that we're working on. We shared some of our examples last week, Sarah and I did, about our ambitions and the inciting incidents that it would take for us to maybe reach those goals. So we wondered today, and by the way, Pastor Sarah has COVID from Monday, which is why she is not here today. I think she's feeling better, but keep her in your prayers. And it's sad for her not to be here. So I'm just curious, when you guys looked at this last week, did you come up with any inciting incidents that would propel you to move in the direction of the goals that you set? So any inciting incidents, like you have your roles, and you had what you were hoping to achieve with maybe one role, maybe two roles, and then there was an inciting incident that you were invited to come up with. It was like signing up for a marathon so that you would finally get off the couch and start doing something. So that was the inciting incident. Did anyone do that or have an idea of what they could do? Yeah.
My younger brother has not been part of our family for close to 20 years.
What was the first part?
My younger brother.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so I've been sending cards for years, but never any response. So, and I think it was Guideposts. There was a woman that shared. She started out with a text. So I'm going to try a text message and see what happens.
Oh, good for you. Thanks, Linda. That's so nice. And maybe right behind, yeah, absolutely. Marcia?
I thought about my relationship with my sister. I'm almost 3 years older than she, and I would like to have a better relationship. So we have rented an Airbnb for Thanksgiving and are going to have invited the family to join us. So I'm really looking forward to that time of growing closer, because we're alike in so many ways, but we're very different politically and otherwise.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Those sibling relationships, right? Yeah, we get to curate our friends, but we're just born with our family. That's good for you, and that's a great inciting incident because it takes money and commitment, so you're sort of in. That's a great example. Thank you. Did anyone else come up with anything? All right, so you've got the idea, so let's move on. Like, where do we go from here? We've identified our theme and our roles. We know what we want from each role, and now we're going to you'd think that we would be all the way done. But really, we still have a few more steps to go. How many of us have set New Year's resolutions? And do you keep them for the whole year? Yeah, by February, I think I'm about done with them. So there is this intention of just having the intention isn't enough, that we need to have something more. Things get in the way, we get in the way. Oh, maybe there's conflict. So that's part of what we get to talk about today. Conflict is great in a story, not great in our lives, but it makes for this really, really good story. It's like a storyteller's best friend. Conflict can make a bad guy good, a weak man strong, an arrogant woman humble. So when we think back to Joseph and his storyline, remember what stood between his dream, this big conflict, but ultimately it allowed him to care for his family in a way that he wouldn't have even been in position to do without the conflict. So God's redeeming work in that conflict helped, I guess, really save his whole family because of the famine and what he was allowed to do for his family. So when we move forward in creating our storylines, it is helpful if we can anticipate the kind of conflict we think we might encounter. One of the most crippling, I think, things that can happen to us is to imagine that we're going to have the smooth sailing with no conflict. Because then when we hit the conflict, it knocks us flat. So there's something about closing that gap, I think, that we anticipate what might happen. So we're expecting, and not expecting in a way like our storyteller or our story time stuff that we did on Thursday mornings, not willing it to happen, but being aware that it is out there, that it is a very good possibility, and that maybe that shores us up to deal with it. Nobody ever said that a meaningful life was going to be easy. So Sarah had found this great clip of Kara Lawson, who is the head coach of Duke University basketball. And she does this talk about how life isn't meant to be easy. So I want to show you this. Don't you love that? If you have a meaningful pursuit in life, it will never be easy. Well, that's a whole mind shift if we go into it expecting conflict, expecting it to be hard, and then all of a sudden we're able to do hard things a little better. Anyway, I just love that. There we go. The Apostle Paul wrote in his second letter to the Corinthians, "That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness and hardship and persecution and difficulty. For when I am weak, then I am strong." And doesn't that just keep the space, holds the space for God to work in our lives through us because of these hard times? I mentioned the Shawshank Redemption last week. Do you remember some of the conflict that Andy went through? I know it's like the movie's forever old, but it's so good. The kind of conflict that Andy faced. Solitary confinement, watching his friends die, watching his buddy Red get denied for parole, being assaulted. All of these conflict things that happened to him are what gave him motivation to keep going, that gave him, it's not encouragement, but it gave him a reason to work even harder to figure out how to get out of there. So it's like the conflict actually served him. I want to give you, let's see if it's right here. I want to give you a couple of examples of what conflict could look like as it relates to your roles. So one of the roles that I picked, and that's what I just worked on this one this week, was that of being a spiritual being, so that somehow I would be more integrated inside and out. And my inciting incident that I chose was to sign up to be a spiritual director. So now I'm thinking, okay, the spiritual director, this is going to be this extra thing that I take on top of working and blah, blah, blah. So on your page, you'll see some of those conflicts that you could anticipate for your role. Do you see that? Okay, so physical challenges. I don't really have a physical challenge in doing this role unless I have to give up yoga or my walking with my friends. Financial challenge, there's not really a financial challenge for this because of my study leave. I think I have enough money to cover this education. Skill deficiency. I have the challenge that I have so much to learn, I don't even know what I don't know. So that's a challenge for me. The relational implications. I think this goes back to this idea of time. We only have so much time. So how will this impact my husband, my friends, time with my kids? Those were the kind of, there was one other thing on here. Oh, that the conflict that I anticipate is that my life is going to get out of balance again. It's been in balance, like I'm doing Sabbath on Fridays, I'm trying to right size my work with my personal life, but to take on this extra thing, I'm going to get out of balance. So I can already see how it is helpful for me to anticipate that, because then maybe I will not only be ready for it, but maybe we'll have some ideas on how to address it. And then what was the last? Oh, and how are these, to imagine how these conflicts are redemptive. I thought, well, I'm going to be humble because I don't have everything I need, and so that's going to give God lots of space to work. It will help me to prioritize. I think God can redeem these conflicts because it will help me to prioritize what's really important for this season of life. And then, and also, I think another way God can redeem this conflict is that perhaps I'll have to say no to something, but that will be God's opportunity for someone else to step in, someone else getting to use their gift for something that I maybe had hogged or something. So that's kind of how I worked through mine. And you get an opportunity, I don't know if it's not there yet. You get an opportunity to talk at your tables just for a few minutes about some conflicts that you think you might encounter, and you can make up the goal. If you don't have one, you probably have one at your table of what your goal is and what your inciting incident is and what you're trying to reach. What kind of conflict might you encounter? So you get just a few minutes to talk about that, and then we'll share that as a larger group as you. Any questions about that? Ready, set, go. All right. I would love to bring us back together if we could. So I'd love to have us come back together as one large group for just a little bit. We have a little bit more time together. Curious, did you identify any conflicts that might stand in the way of you achieving what you have for your role, or a role that you guys chose at your table? What kind of conflicts did you imagine bumping into? Indecisiveness. Yes. Wow. Vina.
Yeah, this is Sally, and we have never met till now.
Oh, I'm so glad you got to meet.
Yes, it was really nice. Oddly enough, we both carry almost the same role where we are working. And God put us here, I'm sure, to encourage one another. And the conflicts we're looking at are very similar. And they're like, we're caregivers over people who need help and don't want to have help.
Yeah.
So it's a very challenging thing.
Yeah.
And so we were just encouraging each other to ask God to give us wisdom to stay in our lane and not get out of the lane.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Because and it's easy to get out of the lane and overdo. So we both were facing the same conflict, and that was such a gift that we got to sit beside each other
ordained.
and pray for each other.
That's worth the price of the class right there. That's great. Glad. What other conflicts did you imagine? None at all. This is easy. You're going to achieve all your goals just like that. Actually, I don't call them goals.
Well, we have various things at our table.
Yeah. Do you want to? Sorry, Matt's going to give you a mic so we can hear it. Thank you.
I was just going to say that we had various things at our table, but I think the one theme I heard was concern over time.
Yes. Yeah. There's just not enough of it. Yeah.
Or time to do this thing takes away from time for this thing.
Yeah.
And how they do that.
Yeah. No, that's a great, and I don't know what the answer is to that. Time management, but there's this great need, right? Thank you for that. Well, and it seems silly sometimes, right? But like you have this idea of something you want to do, but you also need sleep. And you also, something always has to give. It's not like many of us are not just sitting here with just, oh gosh, I have an extra 3 hours today. I could work on this project, right? So it's always this juggling or trying to figure that out. Sorry, Kyle, I'm looking right at you. Any other ideas on conflict? Can you see the value if we can begin to play with the conflict that we can imagine we might face? I think a conversation with God and sometimes with a trusted friend helps you creatively think around, because you know the conflict's going to come and you don't always know the shape that it's going to take, but just knowing it, so we'll get to be able to do hard things better, but also we might get some creativity around the things that we do face, and trusting all the time that God can redeem that God can work through that conflict. So many of us need the conflict to actually change. I hate to say, I wish it weren't that way, but you need to be bumping up against something that you go, whoa, this is not what I want this to be anymore. And so, if I were ruler of the world, I would change that. But I'm not, sadly. Okay, so the last thing that is really, really important for us to have is a vision of where we want to be. So we have this role, we have this achievement that we want, we have this inciting incident that's going to get us off the couch, to get us working towards it. We've got the conflict that we're going to encounter. How do we keep going? Well, we keep going by having a vision of the person we want to be, what we can imagine happening when we achieve what we had set for that role. So back to the Shawshank Redemption. For Andy, it was freedom. And he had this idea, this vision of having a simple life by the ocean. And that vision kept him going. It kept him going through all the conflict and all the things that he had to overcome to be able to finally get it. He held on to this hope that he had, and he even held it for his friend Red, who didn't have enough hope on his own. So he shared his vision, and then, eventually his friend did join him, and they shared in that together. So that's sort of this climactic scene, right, of a movie. So that's what we get to imagine for our own life. The ultimate one is when we are with Christ again, and hopefully we hear those words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Yeah, that's what we're gunning for. But there's something that in our story that when we have this vision, it keeps us moving forward. And on that Thursday morning class that we've been doing on using your brain for a change, we actually physically walked it out, where you started here where you are today, and you physically embodied walking forward where you imagined you wanted to be in X number of whatever time down in the future. Then we came back to our starting point, and we went back to childhood or sometime way back, trying to take what we know now and what we have, and then walked into the future. And it was this great way to embody what we hoped we were going to attain down the road. And down the road, I guess our times differ depending on what our goal is. So there'll be a little gap, right, between where we are now and where we want to go. But that's the part that we get to walk with God hand in hand to try to get to that future that we envision. So the scene for my life that I envision, that I'm holding on to, and I just jotted one thing down, and I need to spend more time with it. But here's what I hope at the end of this. So if I get this spiritual director training, this is what I see. I see myself as a well-grounded, peaceful presence, thoughtful, kind, and loving, not rattled easily. And then one by one, and in groups, I get to share what I've learned and experienced so that others also are able to move through the world being more thoughtful, kind, and loving. So I think if I hold on to who I want to be in that particular role, that it will give me some energy to keep fighting the good fight, to do, maybe the sacrifices that I have to make, the choices that I need to make. So that's sort of where we're at, that we've got all these steps that we get to play with, and then we will create a vision for our scene, and it could be written or spoken or drawn. And this question to ponder is, what scene could only take place after our ambition is reached? And then as you accomplish your inciting incident, you set another one. So each day you move your plot forward for your climactic scenes. And ultimately, we're creating this life that is ordained by God, that is something that God has worked with us on every step of the way, that God has stuck God's nose in and helped us along the way, picked us up when we need to be picked up. And I think it's the way to build this beautiful life, with us and God sort of making the plans together. Yeah, Kyle.
I have a couple of negative thoughts for you.
Oh, please. Bring him on. Where's Sarah? Don't give that man a microphone. I'm just kidding.
I don't think I need it.
No. Well, he's recording it, so then I won't have to repeat
okay.
everything.
Well, first thing is your example of the Shawshank Redemption runs counter to the speech that the basketball coach gave, because his life got easier. Once he got it all done, he was pleased, satisfied, and very happy with himself.
Oh,
right?
that's a great point. It's a really great point. Thank you.
Okay, so
Yeah.
down the road it can get easier. The problem
But maybe that's heaven for us. Maybe that's the end of the road. Yeah.
well,
Go on.
I don't know exactly how, but
Yeah.
it did.
Yeah.
And the other thought that comes to mind is what you're talking about is the driven life.
Oh,
Okay, you're telling us that you just did.
yeah.
When we get our goal accomplished, we need to get another goal.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we
Yeah.
need another goal, and then
Yeah.
I'm 80 years old, and getting another goal right now is not something I had planned on
Yeah.
putting in front of me. So
But you don't strike me as a person who has stopped learning, or as you're sitting here in this class, or as a person who has like somehow like you've got it all figured out, that God is still working in your life. And I think, sorry, were you done asking your question? Should I wait till you pause? Go on.
that's okay.
No, go ahead. I'll wait.
Well, that's true. The problem is I can't do all the things I want to do, so I'm driven. And that's a problem with me.
Yeah,
Right now, particularly, I'm feeling it.
yes.
And
That's fair.
so maybe those of us in here all want to be driven.
Yeah,
That's what we're taught to be
Yeah.
throughout our life up until this particular point
yeah,
in time. We've been told you need to have a goal.
yeah,
Get a goal.
yeah.
Get a goal. If you don't have a goal, get one. Get two. They're cheap. Okay.
I keep using the word goal, and I'm sorry, that's not the right word, really. It's about living a life. Yeah, okay, all right, so that's nuanced. I think so my Tuesday morning women's group is like the most inspiring thing I do every week, because we have women who are in their 80s and women who are in their 50s probably, and we are learning from each other, open to what God is doing in our lives. And I wonder, I mean, for me, that's where I nuance this. Like, I don't ever want to stop living a life. And I know that doing, being thing, I have to work at being, but I think I can see a difference, although I kept calling it, I know, a goal.
How about an intention?
An intention, yeah. 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 Oh,
It's kind of going where God takes you,
yeah.
as opposed to establishing where you want to be.
But I hope you're doing that with God, right? Like, this is not done in a vacuum, right? I hope that, I mean, when I went through this exercise, I mean, it wasn't perfect, right? But I did this sort of prayer that I'm like, hey, speak to me through what this, because that's the piece that I think we have to include in it. Yeah,
We
go
have
on.
to love God and love neighbor.
Do we?
Once we do that,
Were you in church this morning?
You know, I have to get back to church. I think it's starting again. What time is it? So sorry we can't continue this, Kyle. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you guys so much. Oh my gosh, I would love to keep talking. Oh my gosh.